I'm Elena. I'm 34 years old. And 5 years ago, my sister stole my husband, destroyed my marriage, and left me broken in every way a person can break. But this isn't a sob story. It's a blueprint. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't even threaten. Instead, I waited. I watched. I learned. And then, when they least expected it, I took everything from them, without ever touching them. This isn't just a revenge story. This is what happens when the quiet one finally gets loud, in all the ways that matter. Ava was born with a halo, or at least, that's how it seemed to everyone else. She had that effortless kind of beauty that made strangers smile and teachers bend rules. By the time she was 5, she'd learned how to cry without tears to get what she wanted. Our parents called it charm. I called it dangerous. But I loved her anyway, because I was her older sister, and that's what older sisters do. While she played the angel, I became the scaffolding. I stayed quiet so she could shine louder. I handled my own problems, never demanded too much, and learned early on that love in our house was a currency, and Ava had the bank. I remember being 10 and giving her my birthday cake slice because she wanted to. I remember lying to the principal when she cheated on a test because she promised she'd be grounded and miss her dance recital. I told myself it didn't matter, because she was family, and family meant sacrifice. But even then, there were cracks. Moments where I saw her smile just a little too wide when someone took my side and our parents quickly switched back to hers. The way she whispered lies that made me look cold or jealous. Still, I brushed it off, because she was my sister, the golden girl, the miracle child. I never realized that love, when only given and never returned, curdles into something darker. I didn't see the rot hiding behind the shine. Not yet. Back then, before everything unraveled, Marcus felt like the only person who didn't treat me like background noise. Where Ava demanded attention with every bat of her lashes, Marcus listened, actually listened, even to the parts of me I thought no one noticed. We met in high school, both awkward and unsure, and somehow managed to grow up without growing apart. He'd wait for me after class, leave notes in my locker, and knew my coffee order better than I did. With him, I didn't feel like the shadow behind Ava's spotlight. I felt like I mattered. When we got married, I thought I had finally stepped into my own light. Our tiny apartment, cluttered with books and second-hand furniture, felt like a sanctuary. He wasn't flashy or overly romantic, but he was kind and consistent, the calm I never knew I needed. I trusted him so completely that when Ava moved in, just until she figured things out, I didn't hesitate. I believed Marcus would never look at her the way everyone else did. I believed we were different. But love, I've learned, can be blind in more ways than one, especially when shadows know exactly where to stand to avoid being seen. At first, it was easy to make excuses. Ava had just lost her job, her lease ended suddenly, and she just needed a couple weeks to get back on her feet. Of course I said yes. She was my sister, and that's what I did, helped, rescued, enabled. She arrived with 3 oversized suitcases, a mountain of makeup bags, and a knowing smile like she was slipping into a familiar role. But those couple weeks quietly turned into months. She started sleeping in late, lounging on the couch in tank tops too tight and shorts too small, laughing too loudly at Marcus's jokes. She'd leave her laundry in our room by accident, hog the bathroom every morning, and casually mention old high school stories that Marcus and I had never shared with her. It felt like she was slowly threading herself into the fabric of our life, one loose string at a time. I tried not to overthink it. I told myself she was just being Ava, dramatic, careless, and a little self-absorbed. I reminded myself Marcus loved me, that I had no reason to worry. But deep down, in places I didn't yet dare explore, something had shifted. The apartment felt smaller, colder. Like I was no longer living with my husband, but hosting 2 strangers who were slowly learning how to speak the same language. It started with the smallest things, the kind of signs that vanish if you look at them too hard. A glance held a second too long between Marcus and Ava when they thought I wasn't watching. A joke they laughed at that I didn't understand, followed by a silence that felt heavy and out of place. Marcus, who once teased me for my love of trashy reality shows, suddenly became obsessed with exactly the ones Ava watched. He'd even bring up plotlines unprompted, like he'd been waiting for her take. I'd come home to find the 2 of them on the couch, too close, her bare legs stretched across the cushions like she owned the place. Once, I walked into the kitchen to find her drinking from his favorite mug, the one he never let anyone else touch, and he didn't say a word. I started waking in the middle of the night to find Marcus gone from our bed, claiming he just couldn't sleep, that he was on the couch or getting water, but his phone was always with him, glowing faintly in the dark. Every time I opened my mouth to ask, something stopped me, a voice in my head whispering you're being paranoid, jealous, insecure. Ava was beautiful, yes, but she was my sister. Marcus was my husband. Surely, I thought, those two facts together meant safety. So I tucked those signs away, buried them under trust and guilt, and pretended not to notice how much colder the bed felt when I was the only one in it. I didn't want to believe it, not even a little. Every time my stomach twisted at the sound of Ava's laugh from the living room, every time Marcus suddenly shut his phone when I entered the room, I told myself it was nothing. That I was the problem. That I was jealous, damaged, insecure, all the things Ava used to accuse other girls of being. I started second-guessing myself constantly, rereading texts, overanalyzing conversations, watching my own husband and sister like a stranger in my own life. I'd catch Marcus watching her, eyes lingering a beat too long, and I'd feel sick, then immediately scold myself for even thinking it. He loved me. He married me. Ava was family. Surely, whatever strange energy hung between them was just tension I was projecting, a reflection of my own self-doubt. I buried it all under excuses. Ava was always flirty, Marcus was just being friendly, I was tired, overworked, imagining things. I even started going out of my way to be more understanding, more affectionate, hoping I could drown whatever this was in kindness. But there was this gnawing sensation, this whisper in the back of my mind, growing louder with each passing day. What if you're not crazy? What if you're right? I wasn't ready to hear it. So I shut the door on that voice, turned off the lights, and told myself, one last time, that everything was fine. The silence that morning was wrong. Too still. Too complete. I reached across the bed and touched cold sheets. Marcus was gone, but that wasn't unusual. He sometimes left early for errands or morning walks. But the silence in the apartment had a weight to it, like the air itself knew something I didn't. I got up, walked barefoot across the hardwood floor, and past Ava's door, wide open, her bed neatly made. Something clenched in my chest. I opened her closet, already knowing what I'd find, empty hangers swinging like accusations. Her vanity was stripped bare. No makeup. No mess. No Ava. My legs carried me to the front room like I was underwater, and that's when I saw it, his phone charger gone, her car missing, their usual mugs washed and drying next to each other in the rack. My breath caught, shallow and sharp. I called Marcus, straight to voicemail. Ava, too. I texted. Nothing. I stood there for what felt like hours, every minute slamming into me with the growing certainty that this wasn't just coincidence. I opened the drawer where Marcus kept our wedding photos. Empty. They were gone. No note. No explanation. Just the quiet, soul-ripping knowledge that they had run off together, without warning, without shame. That day, something inside me cracked, not loud, not visible, but deep. It wasn't the kind of pain that screamed. It was the kind that hollowed. The days that followed blurred into one long, sleepless ache, but shock has a way of mutating into obsession. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I needed to know. So I started digging. Social media first. Ava's Instagram was suddenly private, but she'd missed a few old posts, ones I'd never noticed before. A picture of a half-eaten dessert with Marcus's watch barely visible on the table, tagged in a city he had supposedly traveled to for work. A blurry mirror selfie she posted 2 months earlier, wearing his hoodie. I tore through every online trace like a detective unraveling my own life. Then came the texts. I hacked into Ava's old iCloud account. I'd helped her set it up once, and what I found felt like getting punched by every lie I'd ever believed. They'd been sleeping together for months. Sneaking around while I was home, while I was working late shifts, while I was buying groceries for all three of us. Messages filled with inside jokes, secret meetups, and worst of all, love. They talked about starting over, escaping the drama, even getting married. There was one line I'll never forget. Ava had texted him, * she doesn't see it yet. She still thinks we're doing her a favor, *. I stared at the screen, hands trembling, heart numb. That was the moment the grief twisted into something darker, something sharper. They didn't just betray me, they planned it. Smiled in my face while stabbing me in the back. And with that realization, a new voice rose in me, one I'd never heard before. Cold, clear, unforgiving. If they thought they'd won, they hadn't met the version of me I was about to become. I didn't know what I expected when I called my parents, but it wasn't what I got. My voice cracked as I told them everything. How Ava had run off with Marcus, how they'd been having an affair for months, how I woke up to an empty apartment and shattered trust. There was a pause on the other end, long and stiff. Then my mother sighed, soft and weary, and said, *Love is complicated, sweetheart. Maybe Marcus just wasn't the one. Asterisk my father chimed in like he was weighing in on a bad movie. Asterisk you've always been a little uptight. Maybe he needed someone who balanced that out. Asterisk I felt my heart split a second time, this time deeper, slower. Not a single question about how I was coping. No outrage. No anger. No support. Just excuses, dismissals, and subtle jabs that made me the problem. When I begged them to understand, to see how wrong this was, my mother said, asterisk Ava's always needed more grace than you. She's just wired differently. Asterisk it was the same script they'd followed our whole lives, only now the stakes were nuclear. I hung up, shaking, my phone clutched so tightly I thought it might break. I realized, in that moment, I was completely alone, not just abandoned, but erased. They hadn't lost a daughter, they'd chosen one. And it wasn't me. I didn't scream right away. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, staring at the wall like maybe if I didn't move, none of it would be real. But it was. The betrayal. The abandonment. The way my own parents had spoken about my pain like it was an inconvenience. And then it hit me, not gently, not gradually, but like a wave that had been holding back for days and finally decided to drown me. I lost it. I hurled a wine bottle into the sink, watching it explode in a red, glassy bloom. I tore through drawers, yanking out wedding photos, shredding them until my fingers burned. I screamed so hard, my throat felt like I'd swallowed fire. I collapsed on the floor in the hallway, sobbing, shaking, wondering how a person could go from loved to disposable so quickly. I didn't eat for 2 days. I slept in fits, curled up in corners of the apartment that still smelled like them, the couch, the bed, even the bathroom floor where I once sat crying while Ava knocked asking to borrow my eyeliner. The worst part? A tiny part of me still wanted someone to call, to explain, to say sorry. But no one did. Not Marcus. Not Ava. Not my parents. The silence was louder than anything I'd ever heard. And somewhere in the middle of that unbearable quiet, something inside me cracked, not from weakness, but from something else. Something harder. I didn't know it yet, but the version of me who rose from that floor was not the same woman who had been abandoned. She was someone entirely new. I didn't wake up with a plan, not yet, but I woke up different. The kind of different that settles into your bones without asking permission. I was still raw, still hollow, but the tears had dried into something heavier, solid. I looked at myself in the mirror, puffy eyes, split lip from biting too hard, hair tangled like a storm, and I didn't see the same woman who had begged her parents to care or waited for a cheating husband to call. That version of me had died quietly in the hallway 3 nights ago. In her place stood someone sharper. Someone colder. I cleaned the apartment top to bottom, every scrub and sweep an exorcism. I packed up the last of Ava's things and dumped them in a donation bin without flinching. I blocked every number, every email, every memory I could. But I didn't forget, God, I didn't forget. I started journaling everything, dates, signs, conversations. I didn't know why yet, but it felt important. Like proof, like ammunition. I wasn't just grieving anymore, I was studying. And beneath all the pain, a new instinct began to whisper in my ear, not to forgive, not to heal, but to win. They thought I was the quiet one, the obedient one, the forgettable one. They didn't realize that sometimes the quiet ones are just watching, just waiting. The world assumed I'd moved on, and I let it. I changed cities, started a new job in a firm where no one knew my past, and kept my story neat and vague. Asterisk divorced young. Families complicated. Asterisk I smiled at the right moments, laughed at the appropriate times, even made a few friends who thought I was just quiet, independent, maybe a little reserved. They didn't know I was studying, watching people, patterns, manipulation, psychology. Therapy helped, but not the way it was supposed to. While my therapist gently nudged me toward healing, I was learning to sharpen my thinking, to control the chaos inside me instead of letting it spill out. I became fluent and calm, learned how to hold a straight face while reliving betrayal. Every day, I got stronger, emotionally, financially, socially, until I became someone Ava and Marcus wouldn't recognize if they passed me on the street. But I recognized them. I tracked their moves silently, collected addresses, employment info, online aliases. I followed Ava's new social media accounts under a fake profile and even subscribed to Marcus's half-hearted attempts at freelancing. I didn't act, not yet, because this wasn't about an impulsive outburst. This was about strategy. I'd already lost once by trusting too easily. I wouldn't lose again. And so, for 3 long years, I waited, in silence, while every piece of my revenge fell neatly into place. It started as a folder on my desktop named Receipts, harmless, invisible, something I could tuck away behind spreadsheets and work files. But soon it grew into something far more deliberate. I divided it into sections: Ava's known aliases, Marcus's online activity, their address history, every public record I could pull. I saved screenshots of her Instagram captions, the ones where she bragged about their business ventures and working from home. I dug through old tweets, flagged shady MLMs they joined, traced Venmo usernames, Etsy shops, PayPal transactions. I kept copies of fake resumes Marcus submitted, and notes from when he briefly tried YouTube before quitting after 5 videos. I even found an old address they used to apply for a personal loan, one that defaulted. Every time I uncovered a new thread, I followed it, documented it, timestamped it. I was methodical, patient, and disturbingly calm. This wasn't just revenge anymore, it was research. And with every detail I uncovered, I felt more in control. I was no longer the woman who had been betrayed, I was the woman building the case. Because when the time came, I didn't just want to burn their lives down. I wanted to do it with proof. I wanted them to feel it, the precision of what they had created crashing back down on them, piece by calculated piece. I wasn't even looking for it, not at first. I was checking my credit report to apply for a mortgage, a small, responsible next step in this new version of my life, when the numbers punched me in the gut. 3 accounts. Opened just weeks before they left, all maxed out, over $12,000 in debt, and every one of them in my name. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, but as I dug into the statements, the truth unfolded with sickening clarity. Salon supply purchases, hotel stays, clothing boutiques Ava had tagged on her Instagram. It was her, all her. And she hadn't just stolen my husband, she'd stolen my identity. Rage bubbled up, but I forced myself to stay still, to breathe. Because this wasn't just theft, this was evidence, real, prosecutable, undeniable proof of Ava's betrayal. I didn't panic. I documented everything. Screenshots, account numbers, call logs with the banks. I filed fraud reports, froze my credit, and initiated investigations. The debt wasn't just a burden anymore, it was a weapon. And as I stared at the red numbers on that screen, something inside me settled with terrifying calm. Asterisk, you gave me the knife, Ava. Now I get to choose where it cuts, asterisk. I didn't announce it. I didn't post cryptic quotes or call anyone screaming. I simply sat down at my desk, opened the fraud report portals, and began to file. One bank at a time. One form at a time. My tone was calm, measured, professional. I knew the language they needed: unauthorized usage, identity theft, verified documentation enclosed. I provided everything: my ID, past statements, signatures, timestamps, even the Instagram post that lined up perfectly with a charge in my name. Then I took it further. I contacted the police. Not with drama, not with tears, with precision. I filed an official report and made sure it was tied to every address Ava had ever used for those accounts. I didn't want the money back, I wanted her flagged. I wanted her name popping up in databases. Quietly. Permanently. The banks investigated over several months, and while I worked behind the scenes to repair my credit, I tracked every move they made. I knew when the letters were sent. I knew when the collections froze. I even knew when Ava would start receiving notices, because by then, I had eyes on her new mailing address. This was the first incision, small, sterile, but deep enough to sting. She had no idea where it was coming from, and that was exactly how I wanted it. While the banks and police churned slowly through the paperwork I'd handed them, I shifted focus to the one thing Ava cared about even more than money: attention. By then, she'd rebranded herself online as Mama Glow, a pastel-filtered mommy influencer preaching about gentle parenting and natural skincare routines while posting staged snapshots of her daughter in matching outfits. Her captions oozed gratitude and healing, like she was some kind of survivor rather than the wrecking ball she'd been in my life. I watched it all through the fake Instagram account I'd cultivated over months, posing as another mom, just sweet and basic enough to pass Ava's sniff test. I followed her, commented with heart emojis, reacted to stories, and slowly worked my way into her digital circle. Ava lapped up the attention, never suspecting the woman behind the floral-profiled account knew the exact brand of bleach she used to ruin my marriage. She had no idea I was tracking every post, every partnership, every lie she spun for her curated audience. And the more I watched, the more cracks I saw, in her eyes, in her words, in the desperate, performative nature of her smile. It wasn't just about destroying her behind closed doors anymore. I wanted the world she built, the one made of filters and fake wholesomeness, to collapse right in front of her, with the same cold silence she once left me in. I knew I couldn't destroy her all at once, not if I wanted it to stick. So I became patient, methodical, and surgical with my exposure. Through my fake account, I slid into the DMs of her closest mom friends, subtly building trust, commenting on shared struggles, asking for baby tips, even bonding over brands Ava had sponsored. Once they opened up, I began planting the seeds. A screenshot here. A police report there. A quiet, "Hey, I just saw her name pop up on a fraud report subreddit, is this the same Ava?" Nothing too bold. Nothing that pointed back to me. Just enough to stir doubt. And doubt, in that world of curated perfection and unspoken competition, spreads like wildfire. Her engagement dropped. Her sponsored posts got pulled. One brand, a small eco-friendly baby product company, quietly removed her content and unfollowed her after I sent them a polite, anonymous tip with proof of her past identity theft charges. Then came the video. A shaky, teary-eyed post from Ava herself, claiming she was being targeted by trolls and betrayed by toxic family lies. But the comments weren't sympathetic. They were curious, they asked questions. They asked for proof. They stopped treating her like a wholesome mom and started seeing her as a story. She was unraveling, slowly, publicly, and exactly how I planned it. While Ava publicly spiraled in her sea of pastel lies and ghosted brand deals, I quietly pivoted toward the other half of the wreckage, Marcus. He had landed a job at a mid-sized IT firm under a name I wouldn't have found if I hadn't been tracking every variation of his usernames for months. The resume he used was laughable, a Frankenstein's monster of fabricated degrees, fake job titles, and made-up tech certifications. I double-checked everything, compiling verifiable records that showed he had never attended the universities he claimed and had no licensing in any of the fields listed. Once I had the dossier neat and tight, I sent an anonymous tip to the company's HR department, clean, professional, with every piece of evidence lined up like dominoes. Within a week, Marcus was fired. No severance. No sympathy. And since Ava had already branded herself as a full-time stay-at-home mom and influencer, and now had neither sponsorships nor credibility, their household income evaporated overnight. I imagined them sitting in their quiet little rental home, confused, blaming luck, completely unaware that every door slamming shut around them was one I had chosen to close. Not with rage. Not with noise. But with truth, sharpened and silent. With their lives unraveling publicly and professionally, I turned to the one authority that never forgets and never forgives, the IRS. Over the years of tracking their every digital move, I had quietly compiled records of their side hustles, Ava's Etsy shop that sold overpriced resin crafts under a fake business name, Marcus's brief stint offering digital consulting for cash, the MLMs they cycled through like clockwork, all with no sign of taxes paid. I gathered screenshots, PayPal receipts, product listings, customer reviews, and even old social posts bragging about boss babe income. I created a neat, anonymous packet detailing everything, unreported earnings, their real names and addresses, their fake business fronts, and submitted it directly through the IRS whistleblower office. I didn't need to watch it unfold to know what was coming: audits, penalties, stress. The kind of chaos that doesn't explode loudly but corrodes everything over time. And best of all, it would come with no return address. No accusations from me. Just the slow, tightening grip of the government around their already crumbling lives. While they fought to pay rent and rebuild their broken image, I was the ghost in the system, the quiet architect of their undoing, watching from a safe distance as the walls kept closing in. It was almost poetic when I found out they had moved back in with my parents, the very people who once dismissed my pain with patronizing smiles and condescending excuses. Apparently, the backlash, the job loss, and the IRS audit had left them financially wrecked, reputation stained, and pride in tatters. And where do parasites return when the world burns? Home. The same place where I had once begged for compassion and been handed silence. But I didn't feel rage when I heard the news, I felt opportunity. It was the perfect full circle moment, the final act waiting to unfold on the very stage where the betrayal began. Now, with Ava cornered, Marcus unemployed, and our parents forced to confront the consequences of choosing the wrong daughter, I knew the time had come. This wasn't just about retribution anymore, it was about justice, about exposing the full truth to the very people who enabled it. They thought they could bury me in silence, but I'd spent years sharpening every word, every receipt, every recording, and now, I was ready to dig them out. With the entire cast of betrayal reunited under one roof, I knew it was time to play my final card, not a scream, but a submission. I dug into my old hard drive and pulled out everything: the voicemails from my mother begging me not to report Ava, the texts where my father admitted she had confessed to the fraud, the recordings from late-night calls when they tried to guilt me into silence. I organized it all, labeled, timestamped, cross-referenced, and forwarded it, without flourish or fanfare, to the local police department handling the original identity theft case. Then I posted the entire package, anonymously, to a subreddit for victims of family financial abuse, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Within hours, it started to gain traction. And then something unexpected happened. A stranger in the comments recognized Ava's name. Her sister had been scammed by her too. Stories matched. Details overlapped. The pattern was undeniable. Ava wasn't just my problem anymore. She had a history. That thread blew up. Screenshots were shared. Her name started spreading, not just as a sad story, but as a warning. And just like that, the lie she built her life on began collapsing under the weight of truth. Quietly. Relentlessly. Irrevocably. Once the thread blew up, it was only a matter of time. People began digging, deeper, faster, more ruthlessly than I ever could. Within 48 hours, Ava's full name, past aliases, old posts, and shady Etsy dealings were all over the internet. Screenshots of her bragging about avoiding taxes, text snippets from the fraud case, and images from her now-deleted influencer account flooded the comments. Someone even found her beauty school credentials and reported her for conduct violations. Within a week, her cosmetology license was revoked. She tried deleting her accounts, rebranding, disappearing, but the internet doesn't forget, and neither did the people she burned. I watched it all unfold in real time, silent and steady, like I was observing a building collapse brick by brick, only I knew exactly which load-bearing wall had been pulled. Ava went from filtered perfection to digital pariah, unable to post, work, or even exist online without someone exposing the truth. Her online presence, her entire identity, was erased, not with hate, but with facts. There was no smear campaign, just receipts. And she had given me every single one. The final twist came not from me, but from Marcus himself, the man she tore my life apart for, the one she gambled everything on. After weeks of online humiliation, financial ruin, and rising legal pressure, Marcus did what cowards always do when the walls close in: he ran. One day, he simply vanished. No warning, no note, no goodbye. Just gone. He deleted his social media, emptied what little remained of their joint account, and skipped town, leaving Ava alone with their child and the fallout I had engineered. I learned of it through the same online grapevine that had been tracking her downfall: whispers from old friends, now ex-friends, screenshots of her desperate "anyone heard from Marcus?" posts that were swiftly deleted. There was no romantic meltdown, no tearful public apology. Just silence. Poetic, brutal silence. And in that silence, Ava finally stood where I had once stood, blindsided, betrayed, humiliated. Only this time, no one rushed to comfort her. Not her followers. Not her friends. Not even our parents. She had gambled on betrayal and lost everything. And the irony? She was now trapped in the same isolation she had left me to drown in, only now, there was no one left to blame. The first message came on Christmas morning, a soft, Hallmark-style e-card from a throwaway email with the subject line, "I miss you." It was signed, "Love, Ava." No apology. No accountability. Just a vague reach toward the sister she once stepped over like a rug. Over the months that followed, more attempts trickled in: a letter in my mailbox, likely hand-delivered since it bore no stamp, a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize but knew instantly by the hesitant breath before the first word, and finally, another card, this one more desperate, pleading, filled with phrases like "I'm different now," and "I wish I could explain." But I didn't answer. Not once. Not because I was angry, that emotion had long since burned out, but because silence was the most powerful response I could give. Ava had stolen my peace, my home, my sense of trust, and now that hers was gone, she wanted mine back in the form of forgiveness. But I had nothing left to give her. No more chances. No more pain. Just silence, sharp, deliberate, and final. Each unopened letter, each ignored voicemail, each "I miss you" echoing into the void only clarified what I had come to understand over the years. This wasn't about closure or apologies. It was never about hearing Ava say she was sorry. Because even if she did, even if she sobbed and begged and bled remorse, it wouldn't erase what she had done, or what I had to become in the aftermath. Forgiveness, people say, is freeing. But what they don't tell you is that some freedom comes from choosing not to forgive. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Ava didn't want reconciliation, she wanted relief from the guilt pressing down on her now that the world saw her clearly. And I wouldn't offer her an escape hatch from the ruin she built. The silence between us wasn't cruelty, it was consequence. For years, I had been the quiet one, the afterthought, the accommodating sister, the one who was always expected to make peace. But not anymore. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her love. I needed her to live with the echo of what she did, the way I once had to. And that, I realized, was my true victory. For a long time, I thought what Ava stole from me was Marcus, the man I loved, the life we built, the future I thought was secure. But when the dust settled, and the rage cooled into clarity, I realized it went far deeper than that. She didn't just take my husband, she took my power. She rewrote the narrative, painted me as the bitter sister, convinced our parents I was overreacting, and left me gasping in the silence of a story I didn't get to control. And the most brutal part? I handed it to her. I made excuses, stayed quiet, kept the peace while she danced in chaos. That was the true theft, my right to be heard, to be believed, to be defended. But once I saw that, everything changed. My revenge wasn't born out of bitterness, it was born out of reclamation. I wanted her to feel what it was like to be voiceless, powerless, erased. And I made damn sure she did. Because the moment I stopped chasing her apology and started reclaiming my truth, I stopped being her victim. And that was the beginning of everything. Revenge might have lit the fire, but healing is what kept me warm. After the final move was made and the silence between Ava and me became permanent, I began to rebuild, not in a dramatic, movie-style montage, but slowly, intentionally, one quiet decision at a time. I bought my own home, a space that was entirely mine, filled with soft light and sharp boundaries. I learned to love solitude, to cook for one, sleep without flinching at night, exist without explanation. I reconnected with pieces of myself I hadn't realized I'd buried beneath years of being the dependable sister, the accommodating wife. I returned to painting, joined a hiking group, even got a dog, something Marcus always said we were too busy for. Each step forward wasn't about forgetting the past, but reclaiming what had been stolen, my joy, my voice, my time. I didn't need a spotlight. I didn't want applause. I just wanted peace. And the knowledge that I'd earned it not by waiting for justice, but by creating it. I took back my life, not in one grand gesture, but piece by quiet piece. And in doing so, I became someone no one could ever steal from again. There was a time, too long, too familiar, when I apologized for everything. For asking questions, for being hurt, for taking up space that Ava wanted to fill. I said sorry for crying, for saying no, for daring to speak when my truth made others uncomfortable. I bent myself backwards trying to be easy, polite, forgettable. But somewhere between betrayal and rebirth, that instinct finally died. I stopped apologizing for surviving. I stopped justifying the anger that burned inside me like a warning flare. Because the truth is, I didn't destroy their lives. They handed me the matches and begged me to stay quiet while they lit the fire. My only crime was refusing to burn with them. So, no, I don't regret what I did. And no, I'm not sorry. Not for the silence. Not for the revenge. Not for standing up when no one else would. Because I finally understand. I don't owe anyone an apology for saving myself. For years, I grieved the loss of a sister I never truly had, the version of Ava I wanted to believe in, the one who smiled in photos and called me her rock, the one who said we were inseparable. But the truth is, that version of her never existed outside my hope. What I thought was loyalty was manipulation. What I thought was love was convenient. She wasn't my sister, not in the way that matters. She was someone who saw my devotion as a resource, not a bond. And once I accepted that, something inside me shifted. I stopped replaying old memories trying to find where things went wrong. Because it didn't go wrong, it started wrong. Ava was never the sister she pretended to be. But I was the sister I claimed to be. I protected her. I loved her. I stood by her until she burned every bridge I helped build. And I won't carry shame for her choices anymore. I didn't lose a sister. I released a lie. And that truth, as painful as it once was, is now the most freeing thing I know. There are days when Ava still crosses my mind, not as a sister, not as the girl I once protected, but as a shadow flickering at the edge of memory. I don't flinch anymore. I don't spiral. She's no longer a wound, just scar tissue, faded, painless, proof that healing happened. I don't stalk her socials or wonder where she is. I don't replay the betrayal like a song stuck on loop. That part of my life is closed, sealed like a door I no longer need to check. I let go of the idea that we'd ever reconcile or make sense of what she did. Because not every ghost deserves resurrection. Some are meant to stay buried, untouched, unspoken, irrelevant. Ava became one of those for me. Not because I forgot, but because I finally remembered who I am without her. And that woman doesn't need closure, just quiet. It's been 5 years now, and if you asked me whether I'd do it all again, every calculated move, every moment of silence, every choice to walk away instead of scream, my answer wouldn't waver, yes. 1,000 times, yes. I don't regret the revenge, because it wasn't petty. It was precise. It wasn't about destruction, it was about restoration. I didn't just tear them down, I rebuilt myself, stronger, quieter, wiser. They taught me the cost of betrayal, but I taught them the cost of underestimating the wrong woman. Ava still sends Christmas cards, hoping I'll crack. I never write back, because this story isn't about her anymore. It's about me, the woman who stood in the fire, came out forged, and didn't just survive. I thrived. And I didn't do it for applause or pity. I did it to take my power back, slowly, quietly, irrevocably. And no, I don't regret it, not for a second.